Chapter 5.
Our farming year was settling into a routine, punctuated not only by the usual round of planting and harvesting, but more importantly for us, by attendance at shows. In 1950, our cattle did extremely well on their first appearance at the Royal Show at Nakuru. We entered 10 animals and were awarded 10 prizes. As the years went on, we would do even better, but at first there was some resentment at our success. Livestock suffered from diseases in Kenya which were almost unheard of in England. We were forever calling out the vet. And human beings were more vulnerable too. I thanked heaven that I had trained as a nurse during the war, for I had to attend more than one difficult birth among the African women. The Africans often seemed slightly suspicious of our medicine. Perhaps they had heard strange tales, like the one about Jasper Maskelyne. This famous magician was preparing to settle near Nakuru at about this time. We heard that when he gave a show for the Africans, he got to the point where he sawed a lady's arm off, and the native boy, who had got up on stage to help him, was sick, and when he began to saw the woman in half, the whole audience got up and left. When Bertrand and Naomi left, we settled down to some hard work, before departing for a short stay at the coast.
27th of August, 1950. We have started silage making. The maize is still green and the cobs are soft. The boys cut a small area with a panga, a native knife, and then the tractor and both ox carts bring the maize, stalk, leaves and cob to a huge pit on the edge of the field, where the other tractor is working a cutter-blower machine. This machine cuts the maize into small pieces which are more easily digestible for the cattle and blows it straight into the pit. David's favourite walk is now up there to watch it. When the pit is full, the oxen will be walked over it to trample down the silage, and then the pit closed with about 4 feet of earth on top. It should keep for at least 2 years and represents a good insurance against locusts.
At the coast.
5th of September 1950. As we write this, we are sitting on the broad, airy veranda of the little house, which is to be our home for the next 3 weeks. The house is low, single-storey, and the veranda runs all the way round the double L in which it is shaped. It is distempered white, with a brown makuti roof. In the middle is a large sitting room which nobody uses as one lives, even for meals, on the veranda. On one side are 2 bedrooms and a bathroom for David and the Swiss girls, and on the other a large room and bathroom for us. The bathrooms are sketchy, for one lives in the sea and washes oneself in a tin bath with the brackish water from the well at the back. The house has no windows, just the usual expanded metal grids to stop bats or other animals. The climate is perfect, and I am typing this wearing nothing but a pair of shorts. The house nestles among palm trees, which have a marvellous crop of coconuts. From their branches hang masses of little nests, constantly visited by chattering, multicoloured weaver birds. The sea is 100 yards away, down a wide avenue. The beach is silver-white sand, and the blue water stretches calm and shallow out to the coral reef, marked by a line of white breakers. We brought 13 pieces of luggage, all the linen and blankets we need here, a sack of posho for the 5 houseboys, who came down on the lorry, and a crate of live chickens and ducks which we brought for our consumption. We have not got guara here, but one of the other boys cooks for us. The food is plain and simple, but adequate. One feels very sleepy, having come down from the highlands, and one sleeps well. We bathe and play on the sands with David, or sit on the cool veranda, reading and writing. I am making a determined attack on my Swahili grammar, and am well into Volume 3 of Churchill's Memoirs. At the same time, we are discussing together in detail the economy of our farm, having brought with us all the books from the accountant in Nairobi. I work most mornings from breakfast until lunch on these matters. On Tuesday, Rosemary and I went into Mombasa. The city is situated on an island, and to approach it from here we have to cross both a ferry and a toll bridge. The ferry is hand-worked by a chain, and the crew who worked it sang and danced as they pulled us and our car across. The road ran through coconut and banana groves, and occasionally there was a small village of thatched huts, one of which was a settlement for freed slaves, still inhabited by their descendants. In Mombasa, you see Goans, Arabs, Seychellois, Africans, and many other races in their national dress. The streets are narrow, many of them impassable by cars, and drainage is extremely rudimentary. Around the back streets by the market, there are small Indian shops which sell masses of different cotton materials, baskets, earthenware, water pots, saris. They also sell mixed coconut gratings, ground nuts, betel nuts and betel nut leaves for chewing, and other spices of which you could buy a pinch at the open stall as you sauntered by. At one shop, the sweetest little Indian girl of about 12 was serving the customers. Nothing would induce her to come down to our price for some baskets which we were buying. Personally, I would have bought the whole shop because she was so alluring, but Rosemary would not allow it. Itinerant sellers of black coffee, with copper coffee pots after the Persian style, wandered up and down the street, clanking the little metal cups in their hand to draw attention to their presence. From the club where we had lunch, there was a beautiful outlook over an arm of the sea towards English Point, with Arab dhows turning and tacking in the sea in front of us. Small dhows are used for the coastal trade between Mombasa and the ancient city of Lamu. One can see them lying at anchor in the port. Their big masts, instead of springing up straight from the deck, are set forward at an angle of about 60 degrees and look as if they will crash down at any moment. 17th of September 1950. This last week has slipped by imperceptibly. Days disappearing one by one, each morning, afternoon and evening much the same as the last, filled with the roar of the sea breaking into a white foam line on the coral reef, the fluting of the oriole birds calling to each other from the woods, the chattering of yellow weaver birds busily hovering around their little nests. These nests are shaped like an old-fashioned cradle and hang upside down in the waving palm trees flanking the house. Less aesthetic are the sounds of my own clacking typewriter, my halting sentences addressed to a teacher of the Quran who comes daily to teach me conversational Swahili, and the occasional shriek of a bush baby which punctuates the night. On Monday we went to the coral reef at low tide, walking across seaweed and splashing through pools, each pool like a showcase in an aquarium, with the sun shining through the water and the white sand showing off many coloured shells, curious seaweed, and little fish which slipped in and out of the coral so fast that one could hardly see them. There were bright red starfish 9 inches across, and smaller editions in black and white, and enormous sea slugs 1 foot long and 2 inches round, lying motionless in the sand. I met a man who was catching octopi, winkling them out of their holes in the coral with a pointed stick. He had several in his basket, their tentacles up to 1 foot long. They are considered quite a delicacy, and taste something between a prawn and a lobster. The Swiss girls are in the 7th heaven of delight, for on Thursday 2 charming young Swiss men, sent by our next-door neighbour, turned up and took them out to dinner. These men work on a large sisal estate just up the road, which is entirely manned by Swiss technical staff, and they are all very lonely. Last night they took the girls out dancing in Mombasa, and today they are all going out for the afternoon and evening.
Back at Rhodora.
8th of October 1950. We end this week wondering if all the houseboys are about to walk out on us, though somehow we think they won't. It all started on Friday when we had another long morning in Nakuru, where this time I had to attend a meeting of the East Africa Studbook Committee as the Guernsey Society representative. On our return for a late lunch, we were met by Monique, who announced that the kitchen boy had gone down to Nakuru to see the dentist, leaving chaos behind him. First thing in the morning, he had come to Rosemary for medicine, pointing inside his mouth, and she had treated him with cough mixture and aspirin, hoping it would cure his toothache. Quite rightly, he had decided that the Memsahib Makubwa had not given him the correct remedy, and then he disappeared. So Monique told the nursery boy to go to the kitchen to help Gwara, but was met with a flat refusal. Such an undignified job for such a superior boy. And the same thing happened when she asked Kitao, the temporary second houseboy. Rosemary, hearing this, went to find the boys and ordered them to do the work. They still refused. So, after a rather cloudy lunch, I ordered a formal court of inquiry in the office, and the two boys were on the mat for insubordination. Gwara, asked to give evidence, stated that it was all part of a deep plot, in which all the boys were involved, except him, of course, because none of them wanted to do any work at all. In the end, we made our two boys agree to do work other than their own in an emergency, and to pay a fine of 10 shillings each for having refused to obey an order. Rather to our surprise, they both accepted this, and neither has run away so far. One of them is helping quite cheerfully in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Gwara had raised another point. Neither the kitchen boy nor the pantry boy had cleaned out the grease trap outside the kitchen for a whole week. We therefore called in the pantry boy, as the kitchen boy was in Nakuru. He said that as the kitchen boy had refused to do the Tuesday cleaning, he himself would not do the much-scorned job on Friday. So we waited until Mwangi, the kitchen boy, returned from a mere 24-hour session with the dentist, and summoned him to the office. Mwangi is tall, very tall and willowy. He sways when he talks, and one does not know quite how much he is looking at one, as he has a faint squint, and a habit of rolling his eyes when spoken to. Having first soundly lectured him on A, departing without leave, and B, taking all day off in order to have half an hour at the dentist's, we came to the question of the grease trap. "Well," said Mwangi, "I am not a bad boy, and I do not want to leave. But on the way back from Mombasa, I met my father, and he told me that my mother, on her deathbed, had made him promise that I should never have anything to do with drains, or WCs under any circumstances. And so, as it was on her deathbed, I cannot do anything else but refuse to do the work." Regrettably, he was sacked. Had he not been, all the boys would have told us that their grandmothers, aunts, mothers, and even cousins had forbidden them to do the job, on their deathbeds. 29th of October, 1950. On Tuesday, we started moving the animals down to the showground in our farm lorry. Ace and I went with the first load, carrying Valentine and a greyed cow, which was in the milk yield trials. Then he stayed down there, and I did the next load, carrying the butterfat baby, our little bull Morvley's Beauty's Triumph, and the best heifer. After lunch in Nakuru, Rosemary and I had to go to meet the judge, Colonel Brown, so John Clark saw to the rest of the loading, and Ace received the animals at the other end. Although we entered 17 animals, we took down only 10 in the end, but it took all day, until after dark, to get them there. When they arrived at the ground, they had to be inspected by a vet, and then they went to the stalls allotted to them. To return to our meeting the judge. It had been arranged that Colonel Brown would arrive in Kenya on the 15th and stay with a cousin of his wife's called Beecham at Naivasha for a night before going on to Kabazi. Soon after we had passed through Naivasha Township, Rosemary and I turned off down a ghastly road towards the lake. After 13 miles, we arrived at a house and asked for Mr. Beecham. His servant said he was not at home, but there was a stranger in the house. Full of hope, we walked in, to find a man in his 60s in stockinged feet, pulling an inadequate dressing gown around him. "Are you Colonel Brown?" we asked. "Oh, you must forgive my appearance," he replied. "Are you Colonel Brown?" we asked again. "Oh, do sit down," he said. "But are you Colonel Brown?" "I'm afraid Beecham is not here," he answered. The smell of whisky was by this time overpowering, and our hearts sank at the thought of this man being Colonel Brown. Rosemary was frantic, because she thought that under this judge all our animals would be sure to be turned out of the ring, and she refused to say another word until she found out whether this man was Colonel Brown. After practically assaulting the man, we extracted the information that he was Colonel Hawkins, and Colonel Brown's plane, one of the new Hermes, had been delayed for 2 days. He had only just arrived in Nairobi, and Beecham had gone there to meet him. Rosemary and I returned over the dusty, bumpy road after a fruitless journey, but we did have the satisfaction of watching a magnificent herd of giraffe browsing right on the roadside. Wednesday was the day before the show, and the day of the milk yield trials in which we had entered a greyed cow. We looked around to see what the other exhibits were like, and after a careful search found a very fine Frisian bull, whose owner informed us that the general opinion amongst exhibitors was that either his bull or Valentine would win the Supreme Championship. In the afternoon the furniture for the Guernsey Society stall arrived. By this time the stall had been painted, and a cream-coloured curtain hung as its background. Against this, June Ireland, the honorary secretary, arranged huge cream pottery bowls of daffodils, freesias, and bluebells. The tables were covered with yellow tablecloths, and the whole effect was charming. On Thursday morning we saw that Colonel Brown had safely arrived, which was a great relief. We introduced ourselves formally, while looking over our shoulders nervously to see if anyone was looking who might think we were collaborating, and handed him over to the ring stewards. Then we went to find Ace, who slept throughout the show in an empty bull box between Valentine and the Butterfat baby, and he was busy putting the final touches to his animals. Valentine was proudly led in the senior bull class. The judge was very careful, checking over all the animals in detail, but our hearts sank into our very boots when he pulled out first a huge American bull exhibited by the Artificial Insemination Center. We had to exercise rigid control because many people were watching who knew Valentine's record in the show ring in England and knew that we expected to win. But we were bitterly disappointed, and so was Ace. Valentine was placed second. We have since discovered that this judge is 100% Maple Lodge, a bloodline which comes from the island and does not like the Fernhill type. The other bull covered much more ground, and he found Valentine too short-coupled. One must admit that as an advertisement for the breed, the AI bull could not have been bettered. It already had 2,000 daughters. That night, Colonel Brown, the Guernsey judge, went up to stay with Freddie on neutral ground, and we had Mr. and Mrs. Coxon to stay. He is a pig judge, over from England, and a very famous breeder, and we were asked to put him up as we were not showing pigs. As a matter of fact, we discovered that he had been asked to judge the Supreme Championship of the cattle section, and he told us that he has often done this at shows in England. He himself keeps several breeds of cattle. We spent a pleasant evening and learned a lot about pigs, and in the morning I took the coxswains around our pigs before we went down to the showground. Generally he gave them a very good chit, saying he liked the way we kept them and our system of recording. He also made several useful suggestions. What really shook me was that when he saw our main stock boar, Kabazi Majestic King the Ninth, he said he would have given it the championship had we shown it. He has told other people since that he thinks we do not realize what wonderful pig stock we have here.
Judging Day.
Then came the great moment at 3 in the afternoon when Rosemary and I went to the main stand while the champions and reserve champions of all the breeds were led in for Mr. Coxon to judge. The arena was large and well laid out, and thousands of members of the public were watching. There was the vast Frisian bull, whose owner was so confident, and huge Ayrshires, Shorthorns, Redpoles, and Jerseys. Our Butterfat baby looked tiny among them, for he is only 18 months old. The beautiful animals circled round the judge and chief steward for some time, and then the judge sent out about 8 of them. We were still there, and so was the Frisian. There were now 4 left, all breed champions, the little Jersey cow, the white Shorthorn bull, the old Ayrshire bull, and the Butterfat baby. The judge took a lot of trouble with them. He walked them up and down, examined their teat placings, felt them all over, and finally brought them all into line. We thought he was sending Ace out of the ring, and we were going to get up to leave. At that moment there was a shout of, "Well done!" from our friends in the stand, and only then did we realise that we had won the most coveted honour in the show. Our little bull walked slowly right around the arena, while the huge Ayrshire, which was second, lumbered after it. Rosemary and I nearly swooned. We hear that there is a lot of heartburn that such new settlers should win the trophy. It was later broadcast over the loudspeaker that the judge said it was the finest Guernsey bull he had ever seen anywhere, which honestly is not true. Valentine is far better. I believe the whole show has been written up for sport and country, so keep your eyes open for it. Later there was a champagne celebration at the Guernsey stall, and we had to go to an official cocktail party given by the Royal Agricultural Society of Kenya for the overseas visitors. Tired but happy, we came home with Colonel Brown, the Guernsey judge. He is 74, and after his rotten journey had been feeling none too well. He is most charming and knowledgeable about the breed. He is very keen also on polo ponies and polo, and has spent many days at Lavacine, Paris, with Rosemary's Uncle Robert and Aunt Nellie. He remembered a younger sister there, and was enchanted when he heard it was Rosemary's mother. 100 people came to our open day on Monday. In the morning, Mr. Coxon gave a lecture on pig breeding and management. We had built a ring in the yard of our new cowshed building, and we arranged tiered seating around it. He managed to slip in some very nice remarks about our stock, which he used to illustrate his points. When he had finished, Mrs. Coxon gave a talk on young farmers in Britain. Then there was a buffet lunch in our new, unused pedigree cowshed, at which Mrs. Mumford, Mrs. Ace, and Monique assisted, and Mumford dispensed the drinks. The menu was chicken and ham mousse, sausage rolls, salad, jellies and trifles, cheese and bridge rolls. After lunch, Colonel Brown gave a long talk about Guernseys. Then there was tea, and people toured around looking at our stock, both pigs and cows. 19th of November 1950. Last week we were separated. I decided to stay here while Ace was in bed with flu, so Rosemary left with Colonel Brown for Nairobi. They stayed in Lady Macmillan's house. She is a very alert, keen breeder of Guernseys, aged 84. The house, Chiromo, is large and set in a beautiful garden on the outskirts of the city. Nairobi was at her loveliest. The little rains have come in large quantities there, and the jacaranda trees are a mass of blue-mauve blossom with emerald grass below them. Rosemary and Colonel Brown visited Lady Macmillan's farm on Sunday. On Monday they went to the Veterinary Research Laboratory and the Artificial Insemination Centre, and in the evening they went to the game park and saw lions. On Tuesday they went to the Coffee Research Station, where Guernseys are kept, and thence to lunch to see the herd of a nearby coffee farmer. I joined them on Tuesday evening in time for our joint broadcast. On Wednesday we had a day's shopping, and Lady Macmillan had a big dinner party with 15 guests in the evening. She had invited the governor, but he could not come. However, the Commander-in-Chief East Africa came, General Sir Frederick Dowler, and the High Commissioner for South Africa and the Governor of Somaliland, among others. Life at Chiromo is delightfully pre-war. Each bedroom has its sitting room, dressing room and bathroom, and we slept in a four-poster bed. One changed into a dinner jacket every night, and there were never fewer than 6 or 8 guests invited besides ourselves. Dinner normally consisted of 7 courses with excellent wines. Rosemary was absolutely delighted to see me when at last I arrived, for she said that Lady Macmillan refused to recognise her as a person, but only as a poor substitute for her husband, and would accept no excuses for my not having turned up. I also discovered that Rosemary had unconsciously aroused acute jealousy, for Lady Macmillan complained that Rosemary had Colonel Brown, aged 74, like a puppet on a string, and said that whereas he had developed a soft spot for Rosemary, she herself was a much more suitable age. The 3 days before I joined them were spent in wild activity, for I suddenly made up my mind, in view of the threatened locust invasion, to drive a road down through our craterland into the Menengai crater itself, where there is a large area of hay which no human being has ever been able to touch. This will involve a tricky bit of road building on our land, and the construction of a sort of escarpment road over a small cliff into the hayland. I have not yet received permission from the government, which owns the crater, to take the hay, but I have seen the provincial commissioner, and am full of hope. I rang Major Kent and got him to come and stay for an indefinite period, and he has a gang of 10 boys. He takes a picnic lunch and spends all day down at the new road, planning and supervising the building. He says we shall be able to have machinery in the hayfield this week, and we are hoping to get about 100 tons of hay this year, and much more next year. 3rd of December 1950. Last Sunday we all climbed into the big car with a picnic lunch and set off for the crater. The road we have built has been named in sections. You start off on Sace Avenue, then Quarry Bypass, then Howard Bridge because Peter Howard built it when he was manager here, then Sace Avenue Extension, then First Escarpment, then Swamp Road, finally Kent Escarpment Road, and you are in the crater. It is 2.5 miles from our house to the top of Kent Escarpment. Here we meet Major Kent, who, although it was a Sunday, had been supervising the mowing of the hay since 7 a.m. Rosemary and David had never before seen either the swamp or the craterland. We decided that it was too hot to lunch amongst the hay, so we moved down to a shady part of the Kent Escarpment Road, overlooking the green swamp. This was not a great success, for the new road was covered in black lava dust, and David had to eat his lunch out of a drinking mug. Towards the end the vet joined us. He had been delayed on a case. In his rather cautious Scottish manner, he is busy courting our Beatrice, but we do not know whether he is making much progress. On Wednesday we dehorned 25 greyed heifers and a cow. The vet gave them all a local anaesthetic in each horn first, and then snipped the horn off with a wonderful gadget which left a ghastly hole in the animal's head. They all bled terribly. However, we have been dressing them every day, and they are recovering fast. 10th of December 1950. Come with us for our usual evening walk with David. David is trailing his favourite stick in the dust. All 3 dogs are chasing birds, people, leaves, or anything else they happen to see. We start walking down a long avenue of macadamia trees, tall with shiny large leaves and a yellow flower. It is cool, for the trees almost meet overhead, and the green coffee extends on either side. Turning left at the end, we walk a little further and enter one of the 2 makuti-roofed piggeries where the breeding sows live. We walk slowly down, checking each pen and the details on the slate above. We ask Menue, "Habari," what news? and he tells us if Champion Queen has eaten, she has been sick, or if Princess the 10th has farrowed, and so on. Menoway is in charge. He is round-eyed and in tatters, a dismal character who takes life very seriously. We recently had to take away one of his helpers because Menoway complained that his life had been threatened. We could not discover why. Feeding is finished, and the sows are lying down peacefully. Some are waiting to farrow, some have tiny little pink piglets skipping around them, and some have families of larger piglets which are approaching the sad time of 8 weeks when they will be taken away from their mothers and sent down to the bacon house. Menoway is very efficient in spite of his appearance, and is a most important part of the 2 maternity wards. David takes a great interest in it all, and demands to be lifted up to have a good view of the occupants of the pens. He has been made to leave his stick at the entrance, and quickly runs for it as we go on to our next port of call. We walk now to the bull pens, where we are greeted with a cheery "Jambo" from Arab Juma, the head bull boy, who stands about 3 feet high. He is looking very smart in the special uniform we have issued to all the boys who work in the cowsheds. As we approach, he is busy brushing Valentine. On the parapet around Valentine's pen sits a little bunch of red bottlebrush and blue jacaranda flowers. We have not yet discovered who it is who places those bouquets at frequent intervals on his pen, and Rosemary quickly removes it, for fear it will either poison Valentine or make a sissy of him. David says, "What a shame," as the flowers scatter on the concrete. Valentine huffs and blows and rolls his eyes, pretending to be very fierce, but he knows Rosemary's voice, and when she speaks to him and pats him, he becomes quiet. Next door, the other bull boy is grooming Carly Charlie. Carly means bad-tempered. His real name is Roses Roberts Ladd II of Fernhill Park. Each bull is groomed morning and evening. There are 5 bulls, and it is the responsibility of these boys to feed and water them, and to take them for an hour's walk daily. Having satisfied ourselves that all is well here, we turn in through the archway into the main pedigree yard. The dogs are put in the office, from which they keep up an incessant whining protest, and we cross to the pedigree milking shed. The head boy in this department, Mustachio, is a dapper little man with a moustache like a sergeant major. He is busy grooming each of the 17 animals in turn. On one side of the shed stand 2 older milking cows, which we took over with the farm, the 3 recently calved heifers, and some which are due to calve in the next few months. On the other side are the younger heifers and those lately served, and not due to calve down for some months. Each animal is fed differently, according to a chart pinned up on the food room door, and this chart is changed weekly according to the amount of milk the animal gives or the closeness to the date of calving. 2 tall milkers sit themselves on minute stools and start milking. Rosemary and David stay and watch, and Rosemary stands beside the heifers to keep them quiet, for they are a bit restless. Whilst the milking is going on, Tudor Ace looks in with his cheery face. He is very busy on a multitude of jobs, but he stops to exchange the latest information. When the milking is over, we walk through the dairy to see the milk being weighed. The head dairy boy is busy with the cooler, and in the corner his dairy Toto is turning the handle of the huge separator, which is taller than he is. It is emitting its characteristic hum and clanging its bell from time to time. The Toto has a wall eye and a charming smile, and as the handle comes round with each turn, his feet nearly leave the ground. From the peace and quiet of the pedigree shed, where the animals are well groomed with shiny coats, and silence and spotless cleanliness are the order, we pass into another world. In the grade milking shed, some 8 boys are rapidly milking 77 grade cows and heifers in relays. There is noise and bustle, with cows milling about, and Arab Karimbi, the fat, sleepy recorder, is calling out from his list, when he remembers, the amount of food for each cow as the head boy moves down the feeding passage with the bucket. The first batch of 36 have been milked, and the second lot come into the shed. There is much banging, heaving, pulling and clanking of chains. The boys whistle to the cows to keep them quiet. David gets mixed up with them all and somewhat frightened, and Rosemary rescues him. He is showered with "Jambo, David!" by the boys. To be called by his Christian name and not Bwana by them is complimentary and shows his popularity. David mutters "Jambo" back and occasionally gives a beaming smile to his special friends. We walk on to the trough outside, where the 43 greyed heifers are being fed their concentrates by a delightful old man who herds them by day in the craterland, and his tiny little boy who does all the running about for him. We cross from here to the greyed calf pens. Rosy-faced Mrs. Ace is busy preparing the uji, linseed gruel, for the older calves and the milk for the younger ones. There are 40 more of these, so she has quite a job, and is assisted by one African and another Toto. The former is rather a trial. He smiles sweetly, says "yes," and does nothing. Linda is here helping her mother, and soon she and David are discovered sliding down the stone ramp outside the calf pens with shrieks of delight and much damage to their clothing. Our next stop is the bacon house, where unearthly grunts and squeals proclaim that feeding is in full swing, supervised by John Clark. We check all the pens again, and Monique turns up with her knitting to take David slowly back to the house and to bed. The dogs go with her for their meals and for de-ticking. Rosemary wanders back, inevitably, to her precious pedigrees and pedigree calves, and I go to button up anything I may have noticed and help Ace where necessary. Eventually, Rosemary walks back to the house in the dusk to read David a bedtime story and tuck him up. 17th of December, 1950. The crater fascinates everyone who sees it for the first time, so much so that we are a little nervous that strings of cars may start arriving from Nakuru with trippers. In the morning, just as we were getting up, Lord Waterpark, with his fiancée, his mother Lady Kenmare, and another man, arrived in a Land Rover, and asked if they could visit our crater. Harry Kent made a point of telling them there were no snakes. The Land Rover duly trundled off down the new road, but suddenly they saw a large puff adder in the middle of it. Naturally, Lord Waterpark alighted and shot it. They came back to tell us the story, and we were dreadfully embarrassed that they had met such a dangerous snake when we had told them there weren't any. Harry Kent then doubled up with laughing, for he remembered that the old man who herds the heifers had killed a large puff adder the day before and left it in the middle of the road, and he knew that Lord Waterpark had shot a very deceased object.